Okay, sorry, just 1 second. Okay, so good evening and welcome to the January meeting for Rockland Sierra Club and for Lower Hudson Group of Sierra Club. So I just want to explain for a minute that Rockland is part of Lower Hudson Group. Lower Hudson Group also includes Westchester, Putnam, and parts of Orange County and Dutchess County. And Rockland has been hosting the public meetings for Lower Hudson Group. There is also an executive committee meeting monthly as well. So next month, we'll go back to the third Monday of the month for these public meetings. The plan is February 17th. We're hosting a talk by an expert from the Center for Biological Diversity. Thank you very much, Kathy, for connecting me. He'll be speaking about the crisis of extinctions. This is a very serious crisis, but there's far less awareness than there is right now of climate change, but equally serious. And we're aiming to host a series of talks and discussions on this crisis over the course of the year in order to raise awareness and to discuss, the kinds of actions that we could be taking. So please reach out to me if any of you have any ideas within that topic of biodiversity and extinctions, or any other topics that you'd like to hear talks about. So after our two speakers this evening, I'll also be updating very briefly on action that followed from the Dark Skies program that we co-hosted with Audubon in November. And we'll also discuss some more Rockland focused issues and any other local issues for anybody who's on right now. So before we hear our speakers, I just want to begin with a few more general comments. First, as you may know, for 2024 was the hottest year on record by a wide margin, breaking the previous record that had been set just in 2023 by an even larger margin. And for more than half of 2024, average temperatures were more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above the baseline. For those of you who have been following these things, which I think is many of you on the call, you know that 1.5 degrees increase was the goal set in 2015 as the threshold that we have to stay under to keep global warming from catastrophic effects. So this is very serious to be going over 1.5 degrees. At the same time, I want to acknowledge the tragic wildfires in LA. And, it's just tragic. Climate scientists have been warning about events like this for decades. And it's tragic that we've just as a society, we've just chosen to turn away. And it's equally tragic and even, I would say, really incomprehensible that even now, in the face of this catastrophe and all of the others, many of our elected officials are still in denial about the role of climate change. And at the very same time that we're seeing these fires, some in the Republican-controlled Congress are trying to roll back funding from the Inflation Reduction Act for climate and energy projects. So for Rockland County, for parts of Westchester and Putnam County, our representative is Mike Lawler. He's a Republican. It's far from a sure thing that he'll vote to retain funding for climate and energy projects. So Sierra Club is urging people to call their representatives to ask them to protect funding for climate and energy projects. I would urge you, no matter who your representative is, please go ahead and do that. I'm just going to give you a number and then I'll introduce our speakers. The number to call your representative, it's a Sierra Club number that sort of gives you a little prompt and then connects you with your representative, is 855, I'm sorry, 980 2349. Again, sorry about that. 855-980-2349 to call your representative to ask them to protect climate and energy funding. So now let's dive into our program. Lisa Marshall will be our first speaker. She'll be speaking about one of the top priority pieces of the top priority legislation for Sierra Club statewide and also for many, if not most, of the major environmental groups in New York State. Lisa is known to many of you who have been joining us on a regular basis, but she's the Advocacy and Organizing Director at New Yorkers for Clean Power. Lisa?
Hi, Peggy. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's really nice to see all of you. I hope you can see and hear me okay. I'm actually in a hotel room unexpectedly today and not at home. Do I sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Peggy, how much time do I have? Just want to watch the clock here.
Yeah, really, it's 25 minutes, whatever, I mean, including the questions.
I
Yeah.
don't think that
Yeah,
much.
I know you're usually very to the point. You can take
Okay.
longer than you usually have. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm
Yeah.
gonna share my screen then, and oh,
Okay.
it's
I
not
think
turned on.
I probably have to make you a co-host. And then when you finish, maybe unmake yourself a co-host. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, share my screen and go. Just make this for a second. Okay. Sorry guys, a second. Okay. Am I sharing yet? No.
Oh,
Here we go.
yes, now you are sharing.
Okay, great. So really quickly, Renewable Heat Now is a campaign. There are many campaign partners. The Sierra Club Atlantic chapter is one of our key partners. There's over 20 organizations that are members of Renewable Heat Now and work together to move forward policy, education, and advocacy on building decarbonization in New York. Renewable Heat Now was founded as a campaign in 2017. And we have really helped to move the needle in many areas of policy, not just legislation, but also advocating at the state agencies and with NYSERDA. So we're a fun, forward-looking, very positive campaign focused on solutions for building decarbonization. And why do we focus on buildings? You guys probably already know this, but buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. And most of those emissions come from burning fossil fuels in our buildings for heating, for hot water, and cooking. And the reason why buildings are considered the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions is because New York correctly accounts for methane, the full impacts, not just what happens at the burner tip, but all of the leaks along the gas pipeline system and from wellheads in Pennsylvania all the way till you turn on your stove in your house and everything in between. And we account for the 20-year impact of methane on the warming of the atmosphere, which is a lot more than if you spread it out over 100 years, which is what the gas utilities and the fossil fuel industry like to do. And so we refuse to do that in New York. We're counting for methane the way it actually is impacting us. And when you do that, then buildings become the largest source of climate pollution in New York. So right now we're really focused on our signature piece of legislation, the New York Heat Act. HEAT stands for Home Energy Affordable Transition. And what this bill really means is cleaner heat and lower bills. And I'll explain why. The main benefits of the New York Heat Act and our sort of main talking points are to cut our costs, defend our health, upgrade our homes, and protect our planet. And I'm going to just focus really quickly on how New York Heat cuts our costs. I have a slide, but I hid it. I could unhide it, but I hid it because I didn't want to take up too much time. And I will also share with all of you our one-pager that explains this. But there's 3 different things that New York Heat Act does that save money for all of us, or for many of us. Some of them for many of us, some of them for all of us. The first one is the one a lot of people are familiar with, which it limits household energy spending to 6% of income. This is actually a threshold that was set by the federal government, and New York State adopted that as their official definition of what is too much energy burden for a household to have, which is spending more than 6% of your income on energy. Many households in New York, especially lower income households, are spending upwards of 10% of their income, some even 20 or 25% of their income on energy bills, which is considered very unaffordable and really takes away from people's ability to meet basic needs, pay rent, buy food, fulfill their prescriptions, and more. So we estimate, we had a great study done. There was a great study done by Switchbox that used to be called, oh, I can't remember their old name. So Switchbox did a study that showed that almost 1 in 4 households would save money from this 6% limit, meaning that are currently spending more than 6% on energy now. But that's not the only way that the New York Heat Act would save us money. We are also, all utility rate payers are spending $200 million a year, we estimate, on the cost of giving free gas hookups to free new gas hookups, meaning expanding the gas system to new buildings. Not necessarily a building that was just built, but it could be a building that currently doesn't have gas service but requests it. If they request gas service and they're in a gas territory, the gas company has to provide that hookup, and we all pay for 100 feet of that hookup, which is called the 100-foot rule. So we estimate that we're spending on our bills collectively at least $200 million a year to expand the gas system at a time when we know that we must be actually retracting and downsizing that gas system. So that's money saved to not be giving out that money to keep expanding the gas system. The last way that the New York Heat Act saves money is kind of one of the most important things, but it's also one of the hardest to understand. But basically, all the gas utilities are required by law to maintain the gas system and provide gas into the future. And our public service law actually says gas. It doesn't say energy. So even if the public utilities say they planned to dig up your street, take out an old gas pipe and put a new gas pipe in, say they decided, hey, instead, let's give everybody a heat pump on that street and weatherize their house and give them a new stove. And that might be cheaper in many cases than replacing that gas pipe. And it's also compliant with our climate law. Well, they actually can't do that right now because the law says they have to provide gas. So currently, the gas utilities are planning to spend billions for the coming decades in replacing gas pipes, upgrading the gas system, and maintaining the gas system. Of course, we still want the utilities to maintain a safe gas system, and they are required by law to do that. And this New York Heat Act reiterates that that is a requirement, but we also want them to be able to plan to strategically downsize and right-size that gas system over the coming decades. And in order for that to happen, we need to pass the New York Heat Act. So really quickly, I'll go over these other points. So upgrade our homes. That means that this ratepayer money that right now is going to the gas pipes could go to home upgrades, including like new appliances, heat pumps, weatherization, etc. We were looking to get, provide for people who are being transitioned off the gas system, modern, state-of-the-art heating and cooking equipment, etc., in their homes. Defend our health. I think you're probably all aware of the really mounting evidence for the negative health impacts of burning gas in your house. And I'm not going to talk about that much because Tim is going to go over that in his presentation. And I'm also not going to really talk much about protect our planet. We all know that we need to stop burning fossil fuels and that buildings are the largest source of emissions. So the obvious in order to start moving off of burning fossil fuels in our buildings, and protect our planet, we need to pass the New York Heat Act. So that brings us to New York State. We know that next week, a new administration will be sworn in Washington that is pledged to drill, baby, drill. And as the last time this happened, climate leadership really needs to happen in the states like New York. Remember that what happens in New York is very important. If New York were a standalone country, it would be the 11th or 10th biggest economy in the world. We are one of the leading consumers of fracked gas. So even if the rest of the country is going in the wrong direction, states like New York, California can make a huge impact by moving our climate policy forward. And so for this to happen, Governor Hochul, as the chief executive of this state, must lead and fulfill the promise of our Climate Act. Speaking of the Climate Act, guess what happened last time Trump was in office? We passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. We took bold action, and now it's time to really implement that. And one of the key things in order to implement that is to pass the New York Heat Act. So how are we going to, I'm going to skip this slide. I'll just say over 200 organizations sent a letter to Governor Hochul about what we were looking to see in her budget, with the New York Heat Act being first and foremost, something called the GAP Fund, which I won't go into, but it's to help homes to transition to be ready for to transition off of gas. We need the state agencies to set binding emissions limits for the gas utilities, because in the CLCPA or the Climate Act, the limits are set for the electricity sector, but not the other sectors. And so each other sector can point at the other one and say, well, I don't have to cut that much emissions, transportation to do it. So we need that. And then the Renewable Capital Act and I'll just say this last point is really, we want the state to lead by example by decarbonizing the 15 most polluting state facilities, which a lot of which are campuses, plus the Capitol building complex. And this is a really exciting initiative that we feel strongly that the governor should get behind and fund. And this will really set us on an example of what can be done in these large facilities. All right, moving on. So I'm just going to quickly say where we are in time. This is how legislation moves in Albany. Here's the timeline. We are here. Oh, this needs to be updated. Actually, the state of the state isn't the 8th, it's tomorrow, the 14th. We'll find out what the governor has to say about climate in her budget, in her upcoming budget. We don't expect her to actually say much tomorrow about climate. We've been sort of told they're not going to talk about climate a lot. But on the 21st, the governor is going to release her budget, and we do hope to see the New York Heat Act. Last year, she put something called the Affordable Gas Transition in her budget, which was big parts of the New York Heat Act, and we're really hoping to see that again. Then we pivot to the legislature, and each of the houses has to do their own budget that sort of is a response to the governor's budget. And when the 3 budgets are out there, we want to see New York Heat in all 3 budgets, because then a negotiation between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor happens, and the final budget is due April 1st. Our hope is to get New York Heat in the budget. That is the sort of easiest path to victory on this bill. But if it doesn't get passed in the budget, we have April, May, and to mid-June to pass it in the regular session in the legislature, and then it goes to the governor's desk for signing. We very nearly passed it in the budget last year, and then we very nearly passed it in the regular session last year. And on the very last few days of the session, the kerfuffle over congestion pricing basically shut down all the talks, and the Senate went home, and nobody picked it back up again. So that was the end for us, unfortunately, last year, which was quite devastating. We were extremely close. So here's our campaign goal timeline. We have done a lot of actions to influence the governor, and I'm going to ask everybody on this call to email the governor. I'm going to put a link in the chat you know, I'm sure you've all been calling and emailing all along, and we had a great week of action in December that many of you probably participated in. But the time is ticking to get any influence on the governor. Her budget is coming out very soon. And then we really pivot. So we need to have a big lobby day and rally in Albany, which is scheduled for February 4th. And I have the sign up for that. We have buses. One is making stops in Croton, and it's leaving from the Bronx, stopping in Croton and in Kingston. So we're really hoping that your region will be well represented at our rally and lobby day on February 4th. And then we'll be having another rally later in the budget season. I believe it's March 19th. We don't have the sign up for that yet. So that's our little plan. Please join us at the February 4th action, and also email the governor today or tomorrow. And I'm putting our Linktree link in the chat that has the links for both of those things in it. And this Linktree is very handy because you can easily copy and paste that link and text it or email it or Facebook message it to your friends to ask them to take action as well. And then I will unshare. Hopefully I was clear, but if there's any questions, I would love. Oh, there's one more thing that I will add that wasn't on the slides. Actually, two more things. One is the assembly sponsor of the New York Heat Act is now in the Senate. And so we are waiting anxiously to hear who the new assembly sponsor is going to be, because that will really help us to figure out sort of how we're going to work with the assembly, which has been the most recalcitrant body on passing this bill. And we're hoping for a strong sponsor. And there are also going to be some updated and improvements in the language of the bill that are going to help make some things clearer that some of you and some legislators have asked about. I can't really go into details about those until they are out in the world, but they're basically sort of like things that you would want to see, like how a lot of people ask, well, when people get transitioned off the gas system, like how much notice would they get and what happens, you know, what's the process? And we didn't put that in the original bill, but it's going to be in the bill now. Okay, now I'm really done. I'll be quiet. Thanks, Peggy.
So thank you. That was excellent. So I do have a question, but before I ask the question, so Jackie is asking whether there's a bus that could possibly, so that it sounds like the bus that you were talking about is going up on the east side of the river.
We had to pick a
Yeah.
side of the river,
Yeah.
and we picked, I actually originally was going to have it at the Palisades Mall, but there was a lot
Okay.
of
So I want to
requests
mention that I'm
for
planning
bus.
to go on February
Mm.
4th. I'm planning to drive up, and I'm glad to fill the car. As people who know me know, I get really horribly sick on buses. So I'm just planning to drive, and anybody is welcome. If you want, put your name and contact information in the chat, and I'm glad to connect and take a full carload up.
Yeah, and if you have a larger group than fits in Peggy's car, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can help with funding a van as long as you have someone who can rent one and drive. You know, tell me if you've got 25 people you want to go, I'll get another bus. Just let me know.
Okay,
We're not
okay,
gonna let
okay.
transportation stand in the way of getting your beautiful faces in front of the legislators in Albany. So don't hold back. We are very happy to provide.
So please put your name and contact information. Jackie, I see you, and that's fine. But put your name and contact information. Lisa's just made this nice offer. So if you can go. I mean, the other possibility is to go by train, but I'm not quite sure exactly about the logistics from the train and back to the train. So okay. Jackie, did you have your hand raised for an additional question in addition to transportation?
Well, no, it wasn't so much about the rally. It was about this transferring of people off of gas.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say here where we live on Mountain View Avenue, which is a little collector road that goes between Christian Herald Road and Route 59, O&R has entirely dug up this road to replace gas pipelines because they leak. So they said I should basically be kissing their ass because I'm a tree hugger and that they know that I would be upset about the methane leaks. And I said, well, it would be much nicer if you could just, get me a good stove and the pans that go along with it, or switch people off of the oil and gas onto other electric ways of getting their heat and their appliances. And so this is what is going on. They refuse to divulge when the project will be done. The road is in deplorable condition, like accident prone condition, because they've ripped up the road, and the town was going to pave the road, and now they're not going to be able to pave until sometime in late spring because it all has to settle for a year. And it's a nightmare. And they refuse to divulge the cost, and they refuse to divulge a timeline. And I don't know how many people it's serving, but this is exactly what we're talking about not doing this. And so Jossie and I
I
are
heard
extremely irate.
I heard that it's costing many, many millions of dollars, like
So
in the
we don't
tens of
really
thousands
know.
of millions of dollars. And it's serving about 55,000 customers in New York.
No, I don't. Jossie,
No?
I
I
don't
w-
know that
Yeah, I
that's
was very
true.
impressed by the
No, I'm wrong on
statistic
that.
you gave, Lisa, that that sometimes the cost of helping
Right.
homes electrify actually would be a lot less than the cost of
Right.
replacing
Yeah.
the gas line. So I know we have to keep moving. I had a question also when you said that one of the ways that it's going to cut costs is through helping upgrade homes. Can you kind of give a little bit, just a little bit of quick detail about that? How would that work? Is that would be for low income? Would it be for
No, it would be
areas that
for
are coming off
it'd be
gas? Or how would it be given out to whom?
anyone coming
Yeah.
off the gas system.
Okay,
Because,
okay,
especially if there's different ways you can electrify. There's neighborhood scale, like a whole thermal energy network in more densely populated areas. We're likely to see that with different kinds of buildings. You're much more likely to see like a thermal energy network where buildings can exchange heat through water pipes under the ground. And in order for that to happen, all of the buildings have to have heat pumps put inside of them. They all have to make sure that all the appliances are electric. They have to all make sure they're well insulated. So all of these upgrades to our homes that make us safer, more comfortable, and make healthier air are also part of the electrification process, because you can't just slap a heat pump in any building and walk away. You have to update the wiring. You have to do a whole bunch of stuff. And many buildings need a ton of work done in order for them to be electrified or electric ready. Some don't, but a lot do. I think you guys probably know, New York State has the oldest building stock of any state in the country. The city of Buffalo is the city in the country with the oldest building stock. And if any of you have been upstate where I live, you may know that the state of our buildings relatively decrepit on the most part, for the most part. So there's a lot of work that has to go into upgrading the buildings to electrify them. And that also means new appliances, et cetera. If you have a gas stove, if you have a gas dryer, any kind of gas appliances would need to be replaced to take off the gas system. I will just add one thing, that if, say, you live in a single family house and you are taken off the gas system, but you want to keep using your gas stove, you can very easily and simply convert it to a propane and use the same stove with a propane tank. We're hoping people won't keep burning fossil fuels, but propane is certainly an option to you in that circumstance. The stoves are built to run on gas or propane because many homes don't live on the gas system. So nobody was telling you couldn't do that.
So I see we have a few questions here. Jonathan, do you want to go first?
Just had one question in relation to the bill and how it applies to tenants, particularly like those who don't own the house. How would this work in that capacity? How will local tenants and residents be compensated in that capacity? I'm just curious to know if the bill has any info on that.
Great question, Jonathan. I mean, I think that basically any household on the system would get, everybody living there would get the same amount of advanced notice, the same amount of communication. With a tenant situation, it would be a little more complicated, and there are things that have to be worked out, because one of the biggest challenges to electrifying rented buildings is that currently tenants often pay electric, but they don't pay heat. And if your heat is now electric, then what happens? So this is a policy question that the whole nation is grappling with, and trying to make sure that, you know, tenants are taken care of. But the tenants will also benefit from the weatherization and the air conditioning. Many people are excited about getting air conditioning. We don't have air conditioning, so there's a lot of benefits that come along with it. But there's definitely some issues that do need to be ironed out.
So we have another question from Barry.
Yeah, it's sort of a variant of Jonathan's question, is how will, you know, those older buildings that many in the city, for example, have steam heat, you know, how is the funding, is there a plan in that bill for funding, you know, those kind of scenarios? And how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, so really what this bill allows the state to do is to make plans with the utilities to look at how to strategically downsize or right size, we like to say, the gas system over the coming decades. They can't even make a plan now because the law doesn't really provide for it. So how it would look in each scenario is a way down the road question.
That's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
that's huge.
But like, you know, so you have to like think about the gas system as this branching tree. So one of the things to do is to think about, okay, where are the outer lying branches, and pare down from there, right? And one of the things to do is look and see where are the old pipes that are scheduled for replacement, and think, okay, instead of spending billions to replace these pipes, inconveniencing people, tearing up the street, we could electrify those neighborhoods. All of that has to be planned. It's a huge process, but we can't even make the plans until New York Heat is passed, until we change the public service law.
Also, just another follow-up, how does this bill sync up with the city's plan to electrify? The city has a plan also. That's the local, what is local law 89, or I forget the number, forgive me.
No, they have a plan where they have to improve the building energy efficiency, and they have a plan to where they can't build new buildings that are reliant on fossil fuels, but they don't have a plan to retroactively retrofit buildings.
But I think to meet those requirements, you have to do retrofits.
Right. Well, that's why they fit together. I mean, obviously updating.
Yeah. So that's the question. How has anyone thought about how they fit together? Who's planning this legislation?
Well, the legislation doesn't put the actual plan in place. The legislation allows the planning to happen. So once the legislation is passed, then the planning process that goes through the Public Service Commission that regulates the utilities, each utility is going to be filing a gas plan, and that all has to get worked out once the planning can go forward. Does
This
that
is
make
really
sense?
somewhat. I mean, there's a lot of the building retrofits have nothing to do with gas. They have steam, for example, particularly in the city.
Right. Well, we're trying to get our buildings to the point where it would even make sense to electrify them, and some buildings are ready now, but a lot of buildings aren't. So doing those weatherization, you know, energy efficiency retrofits really helps us get on the way to get us on the way to being ready to plan to eventually convert those buildings. And what we'd like to see is, you know, starting to figure out and make a plan, instead of what happens right now, where like 3 people here and 2 people over there decide to convert the heat pumps, we're trying to make a plan that makes sense for all the ratepayers. And that is, you know, literally decades of work to gradually make this change, but we have to start somewhere, and we can't really do it in a sensible way until we have this legislation.
So I'm
Is-
feeling we should try to wrap up so that we'll have enough time. Jackie, do you
Thank
have a
you.
really quick,
I-
I'm sorry, yeah,
Jossie,
Jackie, do you
yeah,
have a very quick question?
yeah, I just wanted to know, is the legislation or what you're trying to get with the PSC is to have the language changed to supplying energy rather than supplying oil or gas? Is that what you're saying about the
I-
utility companies?
I don't have the
that the language?
of the bill in front of me, so I don't want to be quoted on what the exact language is, but basically, the meaning of it is that, and you know, it's a very old law that said you had to supply gas. I think it actually dates back to when nobody was heating with gas. That was just gas was how you, there was gas lighting. And they got the gas actually by gasifying coal. And then they put it through, you know, for people who had gas lights in their house. Can you imagine? So,
Wow.
and then it sort of evolved into this gas system for heating and cooking later on. But, you know, and I don't have time to go into it, nor am I an expert, but I will say the law didn't evolve on its own. The fossil fuel industry put its thumb on how the law has evolved and how it's been interpreted by New York State all along. I mean, it's favored the fossil fuel industry from the get-go and continues to. I mean, some people argue that you could look at the law as it is now and interpret gas to mean energy and allow it, but the state has said, no, the law says gas, so it's gas, you know, so we have.
So that's what has to be
So,
changed.
yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
okay. Jackie, did you have a super quick?
Well, that
Did
was
you
actually
wanna-
a twin
okay.
thing, because that was my
Okay.
question, but really what came out of this is that we are being gaslighted by an old language issue. That's really what's happening here.
That's good,
And
Jackie.
it is something we're gonna have to, like, obviously be connected to Lisa to make sure that if there's a write into the PSC on this or something, you know, we're
We'll-
sort
We'll
of.
keep you posted for
thank
sure.
you.
Yeah. So, and Tim will be talking more about the whole thing that Lisa was just touching on about the history of the gas industry. So thank you so much, Lisa. This was very helpful. I'm glad that you had a little more time today to go through more of the details and kind of refresh all of us. Again, I am planning to go on February 4th, and I'm glad to take anybody with me to fill up the car. So,
Please come,
just put
please
your-
come. It's so much,
yeah,
it's so invigorating and exciting.
it
And
is, it is actually.
it really actually quite a beautiful day. So I
That-
really.
And I have to say that is true. It is invigorating and energizing and exciting. It feels good to be part of this effort. And it's interesting also.
That's true.
So, and even the car ride up, if you have a bunch of people, it can be fun.
And I'll
So,
be giving out free hugs. So, you know, you can't turn that down.
so, okay. And so thank you very much. And we'll be in touch. And please, anybody who wants to go with me, put your name in the chat, or if you even just are planning to go, but you don't, for some reason, you know, you'd prefer to do a van or something like that. Lisa's saying that could be arranged, perhaps. Yeah. So, okay, so now let's move on to our next speaker, Tim Guinea. This is a very related topic. Tim is going to be talking about gas stoves, which is obviously part of what we have to get off when we talk about building electrification. Gas stoves are very much a part of that. And also a little bit about some of the hazards, some of the dangers of gas, and a little bit kind of the misinformation that's been given out by the gas industry. Tim is the legislative director for the Climate Reality New York State Chapters Coalition. He serves on the boards of Broadway Green Alliance, Climate Action Fund, the Ashokan Center, the Center for Earth Ethics, and Riverkeeper. And he's also on the executive committee of the Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter. He was presented with a prestigious award for his work on climate crisis by no less than the former Vice President Al Gore. Tim?
Thank you. And I need to share screen. So if you
Okay,
can
somebody
give
make
me
you
that, I'll try not to let the power of co-hosting go to my head. But I do want to just say, first, because it got brought up, and my sister-in-law lost her house. A bunch of people I know have lost houses. I think the moment with the new president's tough, but I want to just say how invigorating it is to be with people who are continuing to do the work. How extraordinary that is, and thank you for all this. So I have an overly large thing I'm going to share, and I'm going to go super quickly. So my apologies for that. Okay, are you seeing that?
Mhm.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk some about a thing called the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act, which is a bill also introduced by Senator Krueger, who did the HEAT Act, and is very much seen as a companion piece. And there's a reason why we think it could be really helpful to getting New York heat done. Essentially, what the bill is a bill to ensure that the public is aware of health risks associated with the use of gas stoves so they can make informed purchasing decisions. That's all it is. So, as mentioned, looking at the history of gas, 1821, William Hart built America's very first natural gas well right here in New York in Fredonia, and thus he was called the father of natural gas, even though indigenous folks were seen burning natural gas in the 1600s on the shores of Lake Erie, and even though the Chinese burned natural gas to make salt as early as 200 BC, still this white guy is considered the father of natural gas, and he helped usher in this gigantic industry in the world. The revenues in 2023 of the oil and gas industry were $4.3 trillion. So you guys probably know this, but what is natural gas? You know, natural gas is a fossil fuel energy source. It's not a gas, it's a soup of gases, and it's a naturally occurring mixture. So sometimes environmentalists will say it's not natural gas. Well, it is naturally occurring. So it's not just a kind of industry moniker in that way. But again, that soup is very different depending on exactly where the gas is being sourced from. 80% is methane. What the rest of it is, who really knows? So it's also known as methane gas or fossil gas. Now, that phrase, though, natural gas, although it's naturally occurring, makes many people think that it's really good for you. I would just say that other naturally occurring things include plutonium, arsenic, the bubonic plague, Ebola, and of course, the meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs. But still, there's this thing where people think that natural means that the gas is, or the soup of gases is a healthy concoction. And the gas industry has really made hay with this. Here's an old ad: quick heat, clean heat, healthful heat with gas. And they've had an extraordinarily kind of robust advertising campaign that's gone back decades, and they've spent a huge amount of money on it.
Today, where food is finest, it's cooked with gas. And here's Miss Julia Mead to show you one.
Hello. Look at my collection of famous menus. New York's Store Club, Chicago's Pump Room, Romanoff's in Hollywood, and Antoine's in New Orleans. They certainly bring back memories of wonderful meals. Meals, I'm proud to say, cooked with gas.
I don't know why Miss Julia Mead is so proud that they're cooked with gas. But it is another one of the things that they've really run with, is this idea that only gas can cook great meals. And I love this one. Miraculous new gas ranges make women better cooks, apparently not the boys. I would never suggest that the advertising industry doesn't care so much about the truth. As long as they're making a sale, you can decide on that on your own. But between 2008 and 2018, the oil and gas industry spent $2.2 billion on advertising and public relations. And this is worldwide stuff. So this is an Asian ad, healthier meal with healthier gas. That kind of trope of this being healthy is something you can see all around the world. They also recognize that, as many industries do, that brand loyalty starts young. If you can get a young consumer hooked, then you've got a consumer for life. So this is, and there are many examples of this, this is a coloring book, a natural gas coloring book that went out to thousands of schools, was given out by public schools. This use of children within advertising and advertising to children, of course, reminds me of advertising campaigns done by the cigarette folks. This is a particularly, in my opinion, painful ad aimed at grabbing young people.
Yes. Cooking with gas.
Cooking with gas.
We all cook better when we're cooking with gas.
Gas is so hot it's not on when it's off. It's the only way to cook. That's what I was taught.
I have a image in my head of some very proud bald men sitting in some conference room, just thrilled with what they've made there. One of the things we know is that recently they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on so-called influencers on Instagram, really pumping up the glories of gas. Now, this is interesting because gas stoves and ovens only account for about 3% of the total appliances, gas appliances manufactured. And yet the gas industry is spending almost all of the advertising money on that 3%. And why is that? Because they have built through this advertising a kind of nostalgia for the little blue flame that some of us have. And they know if they can convince you to run a pipe into your house to have that little blue flame, they can then upsell you with a gas heater and a gas boiler and a gas dryer. And frankly, nobody cares whether their heat is done with gas. They do seem to care about that little blue flame. So to the point of Lisa's extraordinary conversation, interrupting this sentimentality people have, this false manufactured sentimentality people have with gas, is incredibly, incredibly important. Americans buy between 8 and 10 million new ovens and stoves every year, so about 342 stoves will be sold while I'm talking to you. And those purchasing decisions really matter because they last in people's homes between 16 to 18 years on average. And all of those advertising dollars must be effective because 56% of Americans consider natural gas to be so-called clean energy, which is really interesting linguistically. If you change the phrase natural gas to methane gas, it drops down from 56% of Americans to 19%, suggesting Americans also don't understand that they're pumping methane into their homes. As you guys know, so-called fugitive methane is released all along the production and distribution process, as well as in your homes. In fact, new data shows methane emissions are 4 times higher than the EPA estimates. And of course, as you know, in the first 20 years it's released into the atmosphere, the global warming potential of methane is 84 to 87 times as bad as that of carbon dioxide. And yet the industry claims that natural gas is a so-called bridge fuel. Okay, so the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act would put warning labels on gas stoves to let consumers know that all gas stoves, every single gas stove, emits carbon monoxide, benzene, formaldehyde, and nitrogen dioxide. Those are combustion byproducts. And actually, they release a whole host of other gases, and so do the pipes leading to them. And of course, what those gases are depends on what the mixture is in the specific place you're in. For example, in Boston, Harvard University did a study. They found 296 different compounds coming into people's houses, 21 of which are federally designated as hazardous air pollutants. Also, gas appliances, particularly if you're sourcing gas from fracked wells, often carry radon emissions in them. This is tangential, but I just found this out. One of the early pioneers of a technique involving tossing dynamite into oil wells, which was a precursor to modern fracking, was John Wilkes Booth. This is really true. I just feel anything that that attacks fracking is good. So I'm passing on that fact, but look it up, it's true. So it's really important to understand that your gas stove may be leaking methane even when the stove is turned off. In fact, Stanford University did a study. They looked at hundreds of homes in California, found more methane was leaking on gas stoves when they were turned off than when they were turned on. The Concerned Health Professionals of New York says nearly 3/4 of methane emissions from stoves take place when the stove is turned off. At the same time, hazardous air pollutants from everyday use, those are those 4 combustion byproducts that I mentioned earlier, often exceed the outdoor air quality standards set by the World Health Organization, the EPA, indoors. So, for example, a UCLA study showed that nitrogen dioxide from running a stove alone sometimes cause levels that the EPA would consider unacceptable outdoors. A new study just out in the last, 50 days, something like that. They looked at home kitchens in Montgomery County, Maryland, and DC, found that nearly 2/3 of them had nitrogen dioxide levels that exceeded the EPA's air quality standards for outdoor levels. So how prevalent is this? Well, this is a guy named Joe Roy. He runs an energy efficiency company. He's looked at thousands and thousands of homes in Connecticut. He believes that there are malfunctioning gas appliances and gas lines in about 15% of residences built after 1980. If you go back to the pre-Reagan era, it jumps to 1 out of 4 homes. How many? And there are about 71.9 million American homes that have gas pumped into them. So there are a lot of people being affected by this. How many people are being affected in New York? That is a kind of devilishly difficult thing to get real numbers around. One way to look at it is the numbers of calls into emergency services to report the odor of gas. So last year, that reached an all-time high in New York City, 2,175 calls received. And this really matters. Indoor air quality matters because the EPA now says the average American spends 90% of their time indoors exposed to that air quality. And for some populations, it's even more, particularly the very young, the very old, people with respiratory issues and cardiovascular issues, the very people most susceptible to the problems that bad indoor air quality can create. So the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act wants you to know about carbon monoxide, benzene, formaldehyde, and nitrogen dioxide. These things are associated with carbon monoxide poisoning, respiratory illnesses, including asthma, including childhood asthma, the exacerbation of COPD, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and hematological issues. I'm going to really quickly go through kind of what some of these look like. In New York, 1.4 million adults have asthma, about 400,000 children. The Asthma and Allergy Foundation lists 6 New York cities as asthma capitals, including Poughkeepsie, Rochester, New York City, Albany, Syracuse, and Buffalo. A meta-analysis of 41 studies found children living in homes with gas stoves have a 42% higher risk of experiencing asthma symptoms at some point in their lifetime. Another study from 2023 estimates 12% of childhood asthma nationally can be attributed to gas stove use, and that in New York State, if gas stoves were removed, it would get rid of 18.8% of childhood asthma cases. This is from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. They recognize that the burden of asthma falls very disproportionately among specific demographic groups, particularly people of color. I would add to that low wealth communities. 1 in 8 people, adults in New York City, has been diagnosed with asthma at some time in their lifetime. Hispanic adults have the highest prevalence of current asthma. Black children are twice as likely as white children to have asthma, and their death rate is 10 times higher. So carbon monoxide poisoning results in 50,000 emergency room visits every single year, about 1,200 deaths annually. The EPA has classified formaldehyde as carcinogenic by inhalation. A new study that just came out, or report in ProPublica, says formaldehyde causes more cancer than any other toxic air pollutant. They further go on to suggest the EPA underestimates the cancer risk from formaldehyde by as much as 4-fold. And of course, top scientists recognize formaldehyde is great for embalming dead people. Benzene is also recognized as being carcinogenic by the EPA. Here in New York, of course, we know benzene as one of the first things that bubbled up at Love Canal. But why go all the way to Love Canal when you can experience the wonders of benzene right in the comfort of your own kitchen? So we know that all of these things are being released, but studies are also showing that the average consumer has absolutely no idea that these things are coming out of their gas stoves. PIRG did a study that showed that retailers aren't giving consumers the information they need, which I guess why would you? If they're about to hand you hundreds of dollars, you're probably not going to rush to tell them they're going to get cancer. On May 8th, 2023, 10 attorneys general, including the New York State Attorney General and the New York City Corporation Council, wrote a letter to the Consumer Product Safety Commission recognizing that the public is completely unaware of this problem and asking that warning labels be affixed to gas stoves. So what I'm talking about with this bill, it's not a ban. It's simply warning labels. It's like cigarettes. It's giving the public what they need so they can make informed purchasing decisions. And in my point of view, it is a moral opportunity for the legislature to do the right thing. To me, the highest calling of the legislature is the protection of the populace. And that's what this bill does. And it's what the New York Heat Act does as well. So I want to just quickly tell you what the industry is saying about the bill, because I want all of you to help me get the bill across, and you should know. So we only had one memorandum of opposition last year from the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers. Here are their kind of points about the bill. If the problem, they say, was really this bad, well, the EPA would be doing something about it. Except that's not true. The EPA can't. The EPA has no congressional authority to regulate indoor air quality, and they don't seem to want it. And in fact, nobody in Washington seems to want that authority. So it's down to the states. And interestingly, California has a similar bill. Illinois has a similar bill. There's a new bill like this coming out in Colorado this year. We're hearing maybe there's going to be one coming out of Massachusetts. The second big industry talking point is that the data that the bill relies on is very old, and they have the very newest study. Well, we have 4 studies that are newer than their newest study. One from WEACT in Columbia says switching from a gas stove to an electric induction can reduce indoor nitrogen dioxide by more than 50%. Another one from Stanford University says gas and propane stoves may contribute up to 19,000 adult deaths every single year in the United States. A more recent study from Jaim University estimates 38,900 people in the European Union and Great Britain die as a result of gas stove emissions every single year. That means in the European Union, more people are dying from gas stove emissions than from car accidents. And lastly, a new study out of Harvard shows that women are being affected much more than men are by stove emissions. And this is principally because women still in 2025 are doing the preponderance of work in the kitchens. So the data supporting this bill is from a bunch of extraordinary trusted sources. Against this plethora of sources, the industry holds up one single study. And in that study, they cherry pick it and they just use certain sentences and they leave out certain sentences. These are a couple of the sentences they leave out. Compared with electricity, use of gas significantly increased the risk of pneumonia and COPD. They don't mention that. They don't mention that it also says electricity might ultimately be the priority option for clean kitchen, for clean cooking. This is the study that they use to prove we're wrong. Also, they don't mention that one of the lead authors of the study, Eliza Puzzola, actually works for the gas industry. Another industry talking point is that all of these problems can be solved with proper ventilation, except New York has no statewide venting requirement for gas stoves. The state does recognize the danger of gas, and they force their ventilation requirements for gas boilers and heaters and dryers. But there are two devices, gas stoves and portable gas heaters, which are classified as unvented appliances. However, recognizing the danger, in 2023, New York State required warning labels for those portable gas heaters like the one on the right, just like we're talking about for gas stoves. So there is precedent in the law, and currently there is inconsistency. The last thing I'll mention is a trope that they have that says, look, if you're going to label gas stoves, you've got to label electric stoves, because using electric stoves releases particulate emissions, and that is completely true, except all stoves release particulate emissions. Gas stoves do, electric stoves do, cook fires do, a wood stove does. It is impossible to heat food without creating particulate emissions. So one question is it even worth labeling something that is completely unavoidable? Also, gas stoves produce twice the particulate emissions than electric stoves do, according to Columbia. Now, benzene can also be created by those old-fashioned coil-type electric stoves, but according to Harvard University, gas stoves emit 10 to 50 times more benzene than the old-fashioned electric stoves, and new induction cooktops put out no detectable benzene whatsoever. Of course, electric stoves produce no carbon monoxide. Gas stoves do. Electric stoves produce no formaldehyde whatsoever, but again, gas stoves do. Of course, in Albany, and I'm sure in the state of the state tomorrow, we're going to hear a lot about affordability. Cost is always a concern in Albany. Great news, this bill has zero fiscal implications for the state, none whatsoever. And of course, you can contrast that with the extraordinary health costs of some of the conditions that gas stoves are causing. $1.3 billion annually for carbon monoxide poisoning. Nationally, $62.8 billion for asthma treatment. So what are the Republicans in Albany saying? Well, here's a tweet they put out after the bill came out. Hold on to your gas stoves. Democrats are making it a priority to take them away. And this is kind of reflexive stuff. It reminds me of the, Biden is for your gas stove. This is an old trope, and it's not just the Republicans, the Democrats do it too. There's always some shadowy boogeyman coming for something. Joe Biden's coming to take your guns, and they're coming for your cars and your doctors. They're coming for your children. They're coming for your cats and dogs. Elon Musk says they're coming for your homes. They're coming for your rights and freedom to religion. They're coming for your pornography. They're coming for your way of life. They're coming for your hamburgers. Oh, the humanity. The truth is nobody's coming for anything. This is not a ban. No one is coming for anything. Although, given the negative health implications of cooking gas, maybe we should realize that while no one is coming to take your gas stove away, your gas stove may be coming for you. Maybe, in fact, we should recognize, follow the industry lead that natural gas is a bridge fuel and say, yes, it is. It is a bridge fuel to cancer and pneumonia and asthma. And just lastly, I'll mention, if you feel bad about the fact that New York has been given this name as the so-called birthplace of natural gas, right outside the Capitol, you can see this sign, which also reminds us that New York is the birthplace of magnetic induction electricity. Okay, that's the fastest I've ever done that. We are having a
wonderful.
Yeah, it was really terrific.
We're having a lobby day on the 28th. And I'll try and put a sign-up sheet in the chat. And on the 26th, we're going to do on Climate Action Now, which is a free phone app. We're going to do a Zoom meeting like this with one of the lead scientists at Rocky Mountain Institute, Dr. Kathy Nolan, a guy named Chef Christopher Galarza, who's a great induction cooking chef, and Roger Downs. And you can ask great questions of those folks. And during the hour on Zoom, you'll be able to take hundreds of actions to actually get this thing across the finish line. So that thing is in the chat.
That sounds great. So questions? Yeah, it was really a terrific presentation. Questions? Gail? Oh, Gail, you're applauding. Okay. Jonathan.
Hi, good evening, Tim. Just want to say great presentation, first of all. Second of all, I just had a question. Are you concerned in capacity that even if this bill does get passed, could the governor potentially veto it, as for example in California, that Gavin Newsom did that? Just
Yeah,
curious.
so what we're hearing, it passed in both houses in California last year, and Newsom didn't pass it. And what we heard was that he didn't pass it because it was an election year. And the folks in California are really hopeful it'll get through this year. And by the way, this bill just dropped after, as Lisa mentioned, the very late ending of the budget last year. So it only was alive for like 3.5 or 4 weeks or something before congestion pricing. So
Sue, and then Jackie.
Yes, I have a question for those of us who still have gas stoves and have not yet taken the plunge. What can we do when we're using, or not even using it, just having it there?
yeah, well, have a carbon monoxide detector. That's super important. Be sure and you put batteries in it. People with vents, studies show, only use the vents about 50% of the time, and they rarely use them when they're cooking with the oven. The vent should be on both for the range and the oven. Also, the concentrations of things like nitrogen dioxide jump up a lot in smaller homes. So doing things like opening windows, opening doors, not even to the outside, just so that the stuff can move around, is helpful to keeping concentrations lower. And then I guess one other just quick thing I'll mention is it is possible to get very inexpensive little induction cooktops. I think about $100, kind of countertop ones that you can use that are an alternative to the gas stove. And there's a brand new induction stove. They've realized currently you've got to make some big electricity switches to put a gas stove or an induction stove in. Most of the power that's required is actually to start the induction stove. After that, it's not using that much. So there's a brand new model that just came out with a battery in it, so that you can plug into a normal plug without the expense of switching over to I don't know what the fancy plug is, but they are more expensive, but hopefully we'll see the price start to come down and make that a more affordable choice.
And I see Lisa put in the chat that she has some pointers as well, maybe on this, to answer this question.
Yes, we are. Tim covered most of them. We're putting together sort of a one-page flyer with the advantages of induction on one side and the disadvantages of gas on the other side, with some tips. And one of the tips is also to use the back burners if you can, and to use as low a flame as, don't use a higher flame than you need to use. So Tim covered the other ones. It's, if you can, you're actually supposed to turn on the vent before you turn on the stove, and then leave it on for like half an hour after you're done cooking. And if you don't have a vent, of course, see if you can crack a window or whatnot.
And why?
But Tim covered most of them, and I have to say, we bought a house with a very fancy big gas stove, and mostly nowadays I just cook on the little 2-burner countertop induction because we haven't had a chance to make the switch out yet. And I do really like it. There's portables are not nearly as good as the sort of high-end gas cooktops, but it still works great, and we really love cooking on it.
And Ellen is saying heat water for pasta, etc., in an electric kettle much faster, which is true. I've experienced that as well. Okay, Jackie, and then Natalie, and then I have a question too. Jackie?
Yeah, so I took your thing for the lobby day and put it into my email so I can sign up. But you mentioned something else at the end of your presentation about some other event with other speakers. And by the way, this was just an amazing presentation too. So anyway, I'd like the date of that other thing. I don't know if you put it in the chat.
So the other thing is a climate action. I'm sorry, I have too many tabs open. Climate Action Now party. That will be Sunday, January 26th at 7 p.m. It's free. It's a Zoom thing, but I've taken too much time up. There's a way that you can send in emails to all the elected officials in Albany during the hour while you're sitting there listening. So it won't just be taking in information. You'll be making a big difference.
If you send me the link, then I can forward it to others.
It's in the chat.
Activate. Oh, okay, great. Okay. Okay, Natalie, did you have a question?
Yes, my very quick question was that there's no difference with in gas stoves with those with the new gas stoves that don't have a pilot light. Is that the same? They still are leaking methane. It's not a situation of having to have a pilot light because they don't allow those anymore.
Yeah, no, they all leak, and unfortunately the pipes to them leak as well. They don't all. That's not right. But there is a risk that it's leaking methane and whatever else.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
And I have a question. Why is it that they're leaking more when the stoves are off than when they're on?
I am not really sure. It's a great question. I have to wonder whether when the stove, oh, Lisa's got.
Well, I think it's really because when you have combustion, the gas is all getting used up.
I was wondering if.
Or mostly getting used up.
The other thought I was having is that when the stove is turned off, because those lines are pressurized, if you have a gap somewhere, in the line or in the stove, that gas has to escape and will escape. And if you're burning it, the pressure point isn't as strong at the gap.
I have one other question, and that is, so let's say I clearly want to replace my gas stove, but I'm always thinking about carbon footprint also, I'm sort of balancing the health risks, and is the carbon footprint, do I come out ahead in terms of carbon footprint by replacing my gas stove now? Or, is it better to wait for it to punk out? Because you have to create this whole huge appliance has to be manufactured, etc., and transported, etc.
So I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to tell you a couple of answers that maybe help justify things the right way, which is every induction stove helps build economies of scale to move this thing in the right direction. And also, we need a Peggy Kurtz not to get cancer and these other things. Because it's not that I like you. It's just your energy as an activist that we desperately need. No, you know what I mean. So I don't know, but I think those are considerations to weigh.
Okay. Okay, other questions for Tim or for Lisa? Jackie, did you have your hand up again, or you just didn't take it down? Other questions? For Tim or Lisa? This is really excellent. And these two presentations really work, you can see, well together. Okay, Jonathan, another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just another question in relation to like tenants again. For them who have like in my residency, we have like a gas stove. Can't really replace it. not sure how I can discuss with my landlord about even replacing it in the first place. But when it comes to that, what options are for tenants in that capacity? What do we have, beyond
So-
just the burning in the back stove?
Yeah, this is very, very much a first step. And I think that if we can get the state to admit that there are giant health risks, then it opens up all kinds of things. For one, it says the 100-foot rule, we shouldn't be subsidizing poisoning the citizenry, right? I also know there is some other legislation that is directly aimed at tenants around this stuff. To me, it feels like if you get the state to admit this, the next thing is if you have an appliance that has to be replaced, it seems to me a tenant should get a say as to whether you're getting gas or an induction, because now the state's admitting that there are health consequences to that. So I think this is very much a first step, but would obviously hope that it leads to better stuff for tenants and everybody.
Sue, did you have another question?
Yes.
Okay.
Are newer stoves, gas stoves, any better than the older ones? Has there been an improvement in leakage, etc.?
The only thing that I can say about that is that one study or the guy who I quoted, who's the energy efficiency specialist, who was looking at about 15% leakage on stoves from after 1980, and then it being 25% pre-Reagan. I mean, the difficulty again with New York, with our old building stock that Lisa was talking about, is, we've got decades old gas pipes in some of these buildings. So the stove itself, probably a newer stove, it is a little safer, but I think they all could leak. There's a possibility of all of them leaking. And the combustion byproducts, again, those 4, benzene, formaldehyde, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, come out of every single gas stove when you burn natural gas. Those are being pumped into your home. And I would just mention some of those compounds. Nitrogen dioxide, for example, is a particularly sticky thing, and it doesn't vent as well. Carbon monoxide does vent pretty well, but different ones of them get out less easily.
So we should wrap up. Thank you so much for this. This was really eye-opening and somewhat depressing for those of us who do have gas stoves still. Lisa, I've had my gas stove for, I'm guessing, about 8 to 10 years. I don't know if you had a response on that, but anyway, so thank you so much, Lisa and Tim. This was really terrific. We're going to hear next briefly from Gail Pisha. Gail, are you still on? Oh, maybe.
Oh,
Gail had to-
I am on. I didn't
Oh,
know
okay.
I was
Okay.
going to talk.
Okay. Okay. So Gail is going to, so we've just, heard about this really critical legislation. I wanted people to hear some good news about what has been passed in the previous session, so that people feel we can do this, It's difficult, but we can pass both of these pieces of legislation. And Gail is the co-chair of the statewide chapter of the Atlantic chapter of Sierra Club's legislative committee. So Gail?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we did get some bills passed. They were very, they weren't the big bills like New York Heat, which really needs to get done, which was disappointing. I guess the biggest bill that we did get was the Climate Superfund bill, which the governor actually signed into law after it was passed by both houses. And that will, it's going to get challenged by the industry, the fossil fuel industry in court before it ever really starts, I think, because that's what's been happening in other states that have had this sort of bill. But it will require the polluters like Exxon and other fossil fuel companies that knew years ago, decades ago, that it would be causing, their product would be causing climate change. To have to pay into a fund, and then that money would be used for climate resilience projects. So I actually didn't remember that you were going to ask me to present on this, so
Oh, no, no, no,
but
it
that
really was basically to talk about I think the two big
and the
bills,
CO2
which
fracking,
the
right.
Climate
So
Superfund
I was
Act
just going, yeah, so that
and
one,
the
and
CO2 fracking act.
so, yeah, the other big bill, I think, was the carbon dioxide fracking bill. So I guess it was just about this time last year, we heard of a proposal to start using carbon dioxide as the industry was calling it sequestration, so that they would pump carbon dioxide underground. But guess what? It helps them get more gas out. So the industry was using it to do more fracking with carbon dioxide. And there was a big proposal for the southern tier to build all these carbon dioxide lines. They're actually mining carbon dioxide down in Louisiana, where it's stored underground in some places. So it seems insane. And they're shipping, they're sending it by pipeline around the country. And then it's being used for oil and gas fracking. So and they're saying, the industry is saying, oh, this is great. We'll get it's one of those proposals where they will use the natural gas, or excuse me, they'll use the carbon dioxide to frack for gas, and then use the gas to run power plants, which would end up they'll capture their carbon dioxide from that and put it underground to frack for more. But the point is, the whole process will release more gas than or more methane and other fossil fuels than it would save. So it's an energy, it's a bad proposal. And then the other problem is that when you have carbon dioxide being sent in these pipelines, and if there's a rupture and you get a huge cloud of it, and it did happen in one community where the whole cloud enveloped a community and people were starting to pass out because not that carbon dioxide is going to blow up or anything, but it like smothers people, and cars stopped working. First responders' vehicles stopped working because your cars and your gas engines need a spark, and it needs to be able to burn in oxygen. So people got poisoned from it. I mean, I don't think anybody died, but people got brain damage and stuff from it, and lung damage from it, because it took a while. And also nobody knew what it was. So it's a terrible idea. This proposal was proposed for New York State, and we did not have the fracking law in New York State didn't cover that method of fracking, so carbon dioxide fracking. So it got passed very early in the legislature, and the governor did finally sign it. So those were the two big ones. I had a list of like 20 other ones, but they were small ones, like adding more charging stations for EVs and things like that in new parking lots and stuff. So anyway.
So because it's getting late, maybe it's better to do that another time. But I just, one question is that what I'm understanding is that this CO2 carbon dioxide fracking is taking place in other states around the country.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
It's being
yeah.
used by the fossil fuel industry, but they're putting a face on it that it's sequestering carbon, but they're actually mining the carbon where it already is underground. And then you get problems with putting stuff underground, right, Tim? It can cause earthquakes and stuff too. So, yeah.
So thank you for that. Now, maybe quickly, I wanted to run through a couple of other things so that we can let people go. This was rather intense, which it was terrific, but rather intense. So I just wanted to quickly, any other questions for Gail before we move on to the next item? Okay, so just quickly, I wanted to follow up on the Dark Skies program that we hosted last month with, actually in November, with Audubon. So in that, we had a presentation from Dark Skies International about the ways in which light pollution changes the habitat for wildlife, including for birds, insects, and other animals, including fish, aquatic wildlife. And particularly disrupts bird migration. That's one of the things, but we also talked about fireflies and other insects, moths, mammals, also their activity at night. So during that presentation, afterwards, when we were discussing what can we do about this, yes, there's different kinds of policies and ordinances that the municipalities could pass. I just want to remind everyone that Dark Skies International has on their website, they have model ordinances. Definitely glad to talk about that more, but one suggestion that I had made was that we could start by asking the New York State Thruway Authority to minimize the lighting on the Tappan Zee / Cuomo Bridge, at least in the bird and fish migration season. So, you know, this rather spectacular lighting above the deck, below the deck. The above the deck lighting does exactly what Dark Skies says you should not do. It goes up, whereas Dark Skies recommends that the lighting be focused down. It is, you know, rather spectacular, kind of beautiful in its own way. But at least during the bird migration and fish migration season, for, I don't know how to pronounce it, the fish that migrate either upstream or downstream to the ocean, to minimize it, to dim it, at least over during certain night hours. So Christine Toth from Audubon and I worked together on crafting a letter, and it's now ready to send out to other groups. If there's any other people from other groups who are on this call tonight and want to sign on to it, please put that information in the chat. Or you can reach out to me. My email that's easy to remember is rocklandclimate@gmail.com, rocklandclimate@gmail.com. So that letter is now ready. Sierra Club Atlantic chapter is going to sign on to it. Audubon will probably sign on to it at multiple levels also, and we're going to be approaching other environmental groups. Any other comment or questions about Dark Skies? It was really a terrific presentation and discussion. And it kind of, I think, brought out how much people care about this issue. It's also a loss for humans, you know, that we're losing the capacity to see the dark skies and the stars that are out there. And that just seems part of our heritage as human beings, going back to earliest, you know, prehistoric human beings. So, but any other comments, questions? I would love to work with anybody who wants to introduce an ordinance in their community. I think in Upper Nyack, we're gonna kind of look into that. So again, okay. So then I just wanted to quickly just touch on two things in Rockland that are sort of Rockland specific. One very quickly, one is the Water Task Force. So those people who have been joining these meetings for a long time know that Rockland has some very specific water issues. One of them that we have in common with lots of other communities, unfortunately, is the issue of PFAS contamination of our drinking water with PFAS chemicals. I'm glad to talk to anybody more about that, maybe offline, if people want to hear more about, unless people really want to hear about it now. But at any rate, we have a water task force that's been in place since 2015, I believe it is. And it kind of went dormant for a while due to a number of reasons. And that is relaunching now. So this is really positive news. Most likely the first public meeting, I believe, will be in April. There's a survey that is now posted on the Rockland County website. I'm glad to send that out to the link to it if anybody wants for information. They're looking for input about your priorities for the task force. So that, you can do, I don't know. So that's it for what I wanted to say about the water task force. I guess, I should just add that you should be seeing soon, I don't know when, I'd like to say by April, but I don't know, a public campaign to promote water conservation. And following that will be sort of an effort, an initiative to promote watershed planning by the municipalities. I don't know more specifics about how that will roll out, but we do now have 2 full-time staff members for that water task force, somebody for watershed planning, the task force coordinator. Her name is Nicole Leibel. She's very knowledgeable about environmental issues. So I think, she could be really terrific. And water conservation planner, also a water conservation staffer, let me put it that way. There is also a new climate task, there's a new climate coordinator for Rockland County. This was years of work by Sierra Club, many of you, and other groups to try to get a climate initiative for the county. And they are forming a task force. Seems to be going a little slowly, but they are in the process of. So now I know there was somebody from Ramapo who wanted to also talk about a meeting tomorrow night. Is anybody on for that? I don't know all of you, so I don't know if somebody, okay. So I don't see the person that I was thinking would be on. Are there any other? I see Natalie
Peggy?
says, yes.
Peggy, I wanted to know, does the water task force, is that going to involve Veolia somehow, or are they going to walk away from, and the water conservation task
So
force?
that's good. So that's a good question. So Veolia apparently will participate in the water task force.
But we don't know what that actually means. It means they'll be at the table.
Probably they will be sending one representative and they will be participating. I just want to mention for those who are not familiar with this issue, it is also a climate issue.
Yeah.
Okay, as well, it's got multiple ramifications. Obviously, it's a water issue, but it's also, it's a water issue with implications for habitat, but also
Right.
for drinking water, but also for climate change. It grew out of an effort so the predecessor of Veolia, Suez and United Water, those were the 2 preceding companies, had proposed a desalination plant for Rockland County. Desalination is the most energy intensive water supply source of all. So you would be kind of locking in the residents of Rockland County into willy-nilly into increased emissions. Just you have no choice. You have to drink water and use water for certain essential uses. So we were able to stop that proposal, and that effort included many of the people who are on this call who worked very hard for that. And we still feel, because Rockland's water supply has limits and there is rather rapid development, some of us believe that Veolia is still kind of holding in its back pocket the option for wastewater reuse, which is also unfortunately, maybe some of the environmental impacts are less, but it is also quite energy intensive. And there's problems with PFAS in the water, et cetera. There's lots of problems with it. So that's why some of us care.
And is there a certain number of people that are going to be on this task force? Is it a limited number of people, or is it ever expanding, or?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's going to include the people who were on before, but some of the people have, would no longer be relevant for it, because let's say maybe it was a mayor or a town supervisor who's no longer in office, that kind of thing. So I don't know what they're thinking.
Okay.
Not
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Natalie, I don't know if Natalie is still on. Natalie, are you still here? Okay, I think she was responding to the dark skies. Maybe saying that they would like to sign the letter. Anybody else? Any other questions? More local
I've just
concerns?
2 comments. This was an
Yeah.
amazing presentation from Lisa and Tim, is it?
I agree.
Fabulous, just absolutely amazing. The two of them together, the tag team was incredible. I also wanted to just, if Kathy Schwartz is still on the line, I just wanted to tell her that I listened to her this morning on NPR. Her question was really pointed and really was a surprise to the person who was on as a guest. And, her comment was eye-opening, her concern. So
Kathy, do you want to repeat your question? Okay. Well, Kathy, I'd love to hear the question. And
it was
go
just
ahead.
simply,
Yeah.
it was about why is there no comment or interest, any kind of interest in the person that Trump has named as his cabinet minister of agriculture, a woman who apparently is a climate denier, and that there's absolutely no conversation about her and what her credentials are and why she's even in the offing.
No,
So
really good.
yeah,
really
a
good
climate
question.
denier, a total climate denier.
Really good question.
Yeah,
Kathy-
it was a
Kathy-
great question.
Kathy just unmuted, so maybe she wants.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Kathy, did you want to speak?
Well, thank you, Josie.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise.
The guest was Ron Wyden,
Yeah.
the Oregon senator, and he was talking about, he was being asked about, which of the nominees for cabinet posts he was most concerned about. And then his answer to that, of course, was, all the wonderful things he's done for the environment, and I was glad because, he had not mentioned the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
And he did acknowledge that he needs to, we all need to look into that more.
Yeah.
Well, maybe what we need to do is to reach out to our
Elected officials.
Our elected officials, to ask them not to rubber stamp that nomination. I know they're getting, the problem is they're being flooded with so many bad, atrocious candidates for the cabinet positions.
It's just an upside down world there. It's just everything it's Alice in
Mhm.
Wonderland upside down.
Yeah, it's worse than Alice.
Yeah, it's already
Yeah.
8:30, so no soak.
Okay. Keith, did you want to say something? So at any rate, yes, maybe that's what we need to do. And also for environmental protection. Yeah, that's the other one. Nobody's talking about those because some of the others are so outrageous, I don't, it's like degrees of outrageousness. Any other? More like the Stranger Things upside down. Yeah, no, it's really like a nightmare. It's really basically like a nightmare. Gail?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I don't know if Tim's aware, but or some of the people not in our area, but we have Mike Lawler is our, and I think I just decided, I hadn't been writing to him and stuff since he went into Congress, and I think he just has to hear from us, because otherwise he's going to do what he does, and he may do it anyway, but I think we just need to, make sure we start contacting him on every single thing that his boy, in the Musk administration does. So,
I want to repeat, I agree emphatically, because maybe some people feel like, oh, okay, he's Republican, he's not going to listen, but he, if we don't
he did rally about not dumping treated water into the Hudson River. He rallied about the nuclear waste issue, and he did. I'm not saying you can trust him on anything, but
I think that one was bipartisan. I think that one, for whatever reason, crossed that line.
Tim,
and
Tim Sanders.
Yes,
Oh,
Tim and then Barry.
I just wanted to mention quickly, 78% of IRA funding is in Republican districts, which I think was brilliant of the current administration.
Hey, Zoe.
To do that. There was a letter that went out from 14 of whom are back in office, Republican congressmen asking the Speaker of the House not to repeal IRA stuff. So there is real Republican incentive to keep the IRA programs, and I think it's really well spent energy reaching out and letting them realize how popular they are.
So that's a great point. And so let me repeat, I mentioned that for those who joined a little bit later, I mentioned the IRA funding and the telephone number in the beginning of the meeting, but let me repeat it. So this is the Sierra Club's number to call your representative to make sure that they protect climate and energy programs from the IRA. And the number is 855-980-2349, 855-980-2349. I did it right before I came on the meeting, and it just, you get a 1-minute sort of prompt to remind you of what to say, and then you're passed right through. Barry?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, if you're calling about the cabinet nominees, that's really the Senate, right? So
Good
you should
point.
call Mike Lawler
point.
about everything else, but
Thank you.
but it's the
Yes.
Senate that really needs to hear about the nominees. So that's
You're totally right. Totally right.
Gillibrand.
Good
Mm.
reminder. Yeah. And I don't think we can, it's possible. What I've heard is they don't feel like they can say no to absolutely everything. So yeah, I think it's important for them to hear from environmentalists, and so about both the EPA and agriculture. And any other cabinet posts that include climate deniers. Any other last comments or questions?
Yes, Peggy. I would like to say something because it came up about bipartisanship. I think that's something we're going to have to be very careful about because we've always held it up. And I was on there's a Thursday 3:00 chat that Indivisible is having with Ezra and Leah. He said something that really made me think about bipartisanship. He said, when, I'm paraphrasing him, of course, but when you're talking about bipartisanship, you're really acknowledging the correctness of the mega position, not what you feel is moral or just. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to talk about and not hold up, oh, I'm reaching across the aisle. That's what Lawler always does. He's a fraud. And Pete Harcum was very clear about that in the meeting yesterday. He called him a fraud, actually. It was good to hear it said so bluntly. But bipartisanship is not going to be a particularly useful tool in our toolbox, I think. And I just put that out for people to think about it. And also the Thursday meeting with Leah and Ezra, it was just excellent because they were so positive and determined, and they really are mounting a very political and I think effective defense of what we're going to be facing.
No, it's going to be very hard to draw that line. I mean, I think there are some things that do seem to cross the lines, and it seems like some of the health issues do seem to cross the line. Like I see Tim looking up. I don't know about the gas stoves and the health issues, but PFAS seems to be something of a bipartisan issue. It's true that the dumping into the Hudson was also, seemed to have appeal across party lines. So I don't know, Tim, if there's a way to make the gas stoves more, kind of, you did a great job of presenting, but maybe let's not completely, I mean, I don't know, it's difficult, but let's not
I think
assume
that
people.
I think the thing with all of this is framing to the values of the people we're talking to, and often with I think the in New York minority, in DC majority, is that framing to making things more affordable is the thing that they all keep repeating, and the Democrats are now repeating it too. And certainly when you look at California beyond human misery, where the estimates are $50 to $150 billion, and we know we're in that's not the new normal. That's a horrible phrase. We're in a degrading situation, so it'll be more and more costly. I think there's a way to sell all kinds of work in terms of making things more affordable, and that's the language they want to hear.
I think along with getting rid of the phrase natural gas, we have to get rid of the phrase natural disasters, when these are disasters that really go beyond, what could have been expected, the range that could have been expected. I think, just call them disasters, not or unnatural disasters. Other questions or comments? Kathy?
Well,
Kathy?
going back to agriculture, one of my points that I made on NPR today was that if we don't address climate change, the cost of food is going to go way up. And that reaches people because everybody knows that the cost of food is going up.
Really, really good point.
Yeah.
Really good point. Barry?
Yeah, I was going to point out, and to not to abuse your natural disaster term, but is there a way to maybe, utilize the fact that insurance costs are also going to go through the roof?
Good point.
And is that a way to kind of incentivize people to take a second look at certain things? It's going to hit them in their insurance bills. If it is, I mean, no one's going to insure for the same price in California, and no one insures for the same price on the coast.
Or they might not insure, period.
You might not insure, period, or in Lyndhurst and Long Island, or or in coastal areas in Florida. People aren't, the insurance companies are making that very costly.
Yeah, no, really good point. I think clearly, unfortunately, all these costs are coming home to roost. I mean, it's just, they've been saying, I first started really reading about climate change in early 2000s, and all of what we're seeing now was projected then.
It's something to get ahead on, for example, is right. We saw fires, right, in this area of the country. Maybe, we're starting to see, we saw that at any significant level for the first time. So what's going to happen when the insurance companies start scratching their head about that?
Right. And sea level rise. That's another one. Jonathan?
I just wanted to bring up another point in relation to the concern about climate change denial, basically, and the effects that are coming with that. I've noticed a lot around my demographic. I'm between the ages of 22 to 26, around where my friends and family are located, and friends mainly are in that demographic. And I've seen a lot of denialism towards climate change. And that's been spinned around social media, be also misinformation a lot, which I'm really concerned about, because I'd expect it to be, I expect to be heard by, of course, conspiracy theorists, but when you hear it out of your own friends or classmates or coworkers' mouths, it really concerns me, just from my own perception.
And where do you think that's coming from?
Definitely social media, definitely from talking heads like Joe Rogan. Mainly like talking heads from Joe Rogan, TikTok. Some people go on Facebook, Instagram mainly heavily because of what's put in their For You page. They go down one route, they go to other sources. They feel like it's validated towards them, which I don't get into arguments with my friends in it, but I definitely disagree with them because I'm definitely more environmentally sound compared to them. But that just concerns me, honestly, a little bit. It's like younger demographic of my age
No,
that
it's
are falling into this.
very concerning. I don't know. Gail, Tim, anybody have any
Yeah, I
response
mean,
about that?
I'll
And
just
then
say that
Marilyn has, yeah.
I've long thought one of the big failures of the environmental movement is we tend to speak within the bubble. And I get a lot of pushback from that, but it's certainly much more pleasant to talk to the Sierra, to talk to some other places. But, you know, I specifically give talks to oppositional and underserved audiences on factory floors and in homeless shelter prisons, town councils, And I do think one of the things we have to get better at is extending the conversation and not just feeling right in our own insular groups. And it's hard. It's really hard work, but I think it may be the most important work. And when I think about the incoming federal administration, it's going to force us to return to subnational policy, state, county, local policy, which is going to mean we're going to be forced to have more conversations. And I actually, this is completely Pollyanna, but I'm going with it because it's keeping me from being suicidal. I have decided to believe that in that way, Donald Trump may be our savior.
You mean because he's going to promote such a reaction?
Because he's going to force
Yeah.
us to talk to each other.
Right, right. I mean, yes, and just to, stay on the positive side, what New York, there's a number of states that follow each other. So what New York does, the other states are looking to also, obviously California too. Okay, Claudia, Gail, and then, I'm sorry, Marilyn, Gail, and Claudia, I'm just calling in the order of the hands. Yeah, Marilyn?
Yes, it's very quick, something to think about. It came up at the meeting on the 12th, and I've been thinking about it on my own too, about not watching the coronation on the 20th. And some people are saying don't watch anything to do with the coronation. And some people have said they're going to stay off of all of that kind of stuff for the whole week. So I don't know if it'll make an impression in the ratings, but it's one small action that I'm going to take.
I think I'm preaching to the converted here, but I've heard people literally tell me in the last few days, I just want to, go to sleep and wake up after 4 years. We cannot. That's one thing we cannot do. Tune out the inauguration if you want to. I'm planning to tune it out myself, but I just can't bear to watch it. But please, we need to double down. Now is when
not disagreeing with you, Peggy.
Yeah, no, I know you're not. Yeah. Okay, Gail, you were next. Yeah.
Yeah, I know this is a question from what Tim was talking about. It's a question we've been having in Sierra Club because there's, a lot of people don't want to post on X anymore. They want to go to Blue Skies, which is a more progressive audience. But the concern I have is that if we're not active on X anymore, then we are just preaching to the converted. So that is an issue, but to give people hope, and especially like Jonathan, I appreciate your telling us what you said. I just want to let you know last week I spoke to our Cornell Cooperative Extension has a 4-H Climate for Youth program, a Youth for Climate program. And I just spoke to them last week for the 4th year in a row. And I'm noticing the first few years, maybe they had 12, 13, 14, 18 last year. There were 35 kids in there. These are high school kids who are concerned about climate change. And what I talked to them about is how they can make a difference. I ended up with Greta Thunberg is how I think it's pronounced, but Thunberg, and how she says, as individuals, she, as an example, can make a difference or has made a difference. And then when we join together, we can change the world. And then I talk about legislative activism as an important way to mitigate climate change and other things and encourage them to be good citizens and things. So it's comforting to me that those numbers are growing of high school youth that are, concerned. So.
And Jonathan, I just want to add to what Gail said also to say that I think, you need to connect with other people who care and who get it. You know, if you're not connected, you know, get involved with Sierra Club or with, you know, other groups, other environmental groups. I hope you'll get involved with Sierra Club. One of the things that you can do in that way, it helps to keep you energized. It helps to keep you feeling supported and reinforced, you know, because there are other people who just don't get it, you know, and that's tough. And eventually, maybe you'll want to go into a career in environment, in climate or other environmental issues, which, you know, I think there's more and more young people going into environmental careers, which is terrific to see. Claudia and then Marilyn.
Yeah,
Claudia?
it's getting late, but this what Tim hit on is so important, and it's when people wake up in the morning, as we all know, and if they don't have a job, the first thing that they're worried about is getting a job, not climate. You know, the conditions around housing and everything else, and it's like we have to make the connections. And as we all know on this call, everything is connected. And how do we do that? How do we, you know, connect climate issues to all the other bread and butter issues that are so important for people on a daily basis? Some of it I think is easier than others, but you know, I mean, if you look at I know people working on housing stuff in New York City around public housing. The conditions that people live under are on a daily basis are horrifying, and some of it is related to climate. You know, the lack of water, you know, the pipes that go into their buildings, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, how do we relate all the issues? It's not easy, but I'm glad Tim raised it because we have to constantly talk about it, and that's how we can bring more, you know, bring the climate into all these different things that people are concerned about.
And I think we had a good discussion a little bit earlier on this call about costs. You know, how some of these costs are sort of hidden costs, and maybe as we communicate, we need to put more emphasis on that. And yeah, so any other last questions or comments? It's now almost 9 o'clock. I didn't want to stop. I thought it was a good discussion, and I didn't want to stop it, but I do want to let people go so that they'll come again next time.
Peggy, can I just ask one question? Does anyone, maybe you or Tim know, like I've been talking, it's on my list this year to replace my gas stove. So now after I heard all this, I want to do it sooner. Like, where do you start looking, you know, for like installers and, you know, like how do you go about doing the right thing for your house in terms of finding the best products?
Where are you?
Are there specific installers that
Rockland County, I think.
No, when you buy an induction stove from like PC Richards, they charge an installer, but they send an installer. What you do need, though, as Tim was saying, you need a dedicated 240 volt line if you're getting the full thing. So if you can, yeah, go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
Or there's a new one that's a much more expensive induction currently that can go into the standard outlet.
Yeah, but so you might need an electrician ahead of time to wire that. But,
Okay.
But yeah.
And you know, I for vetting products, I don't know if Tim has any particular thoughts on that or anybody else, but I know I use Wirecutter a lot to look at it. Consumer Reports, obviously, and you can get Consumer Reports from your library. George, did you have a comment? No? Okay. Any other last comments or questions?
Next meeting is when?
February 17th. I am fairly sure it's going to be somebody from the Center for Biological Diversity who's going to be speaking about, I think he might be the director, I can't remember his title right now, Director of Education, Public Education or something of that sort. And he's going to be talking about the crisis of extinctions. This is the other big crisis that we're facing. I mean, there are many of these planetary boundaries that we're exceeding. And another one that's particularly urgent is this crisis of extinctions, which is extremely serious and it's just not, the public is not aware of it. It's just not being discussed enough. And so what I'd like to do is kind of present sort of, you know, kind of over the course of a year, present a number of programs discussing different aspects of this. So, okay. Want to let everybody go. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. And
Thanks,
thank you,
everybody. Great
everybody.
meeting.
And
Thank you.
please-
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you and come,
everybody.
come again.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody. Great
Anybody wants
program.
to
yes, very good.
drop
Thank you.
your name and email in the chat, please do so, and then I'll end the meeting. Jonathan, if you want to, I hope you'll get involved. Hope you'll come again. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Peggy.
Okay.
Have
Good
a good
night.
night.
Good night.
Good night.